The throne room of the Red Keep was colder than usual, not because of the stone or the ocean breeze, but because of the tension hanging like a noose around Ned Stark's neck. Imprisoned after uncovering the truth of Joffrey's parentage, he had expected execution or exile, but fate and Varys had other plans. "You must take the black," Varys had whispered, eyes sharp. "Confess treason. Save your daughters. Live." But Ned Stark, Lord of Winterfell, had endured war, betrayal, and death itself in Robert's rebellion. What Varys didn't understand was that Ned no longer trusted the game or the people playing it. And above all, he did not trust Cersei. So instead of falsely confessing and going to the wall, Ned made a different choice. One Varys didn't see coming. He escaped, with the help of a disguised Night's Watch escort, loyal to Jon Arryn's memory, and a few remaining gold cloaks who had once admired the honor of Eddard Stark. Ned slipped out of King's Landing under the cover of darkness, disguised as a wounded merchant. The chaos following Robert's death worked in his favor. The city had erupted into confusion, and rumors of Joffrey's coronation consumed the capital. By the time Cersei realized Ned was gone, he was already riding north, not to the wall, not to exile, but home. Ned arrived at Winterfell in a snowstorm. The people of the north, who had heard of his imprisonment, feared the worst. But when they saw their lord ride through the gates, bloodied but alive, a roar erupted that echoed through the ancient halls. Robb, only 17, had been preparing to ride south with the bannermen. His sword hand had grown steadier, and his voice deeper with command. But when he saw his father alive, he dropped to one knee. "You shouldn't have come back," Robb said with tears in his eyes. "They'll come for you." "They will," Ned replied grimly. "But this time we will not bow. We will not kneel." Ned Stark had been a loyal servant of the realm. He had kept secrets that cost him friendships. He had honored Robert's crown even when he disapproved of it. But King's Landing had shown him the truth. The realm was no longer built on honor, but on lies, incest, and treachery. He gathered the northern lords, Karstark, Umber, Glover, Mormont, all came to Winterfell at his call. "My friends," Ned said at the great hall's high seat, "the crown is broken. The boy on the throne is no true Baratheon. The queen murders without consequence, and we are asked to die for their lies." There was a long silence. Then Mage Mormont stood. "The South never cared for the North," she said. "Why should we care for their throne?" The words spread like fire. By the end of that council, the North had voted. They would not fight for the Iron Throne. They would not serve Joffrey Baratheon. They would declare independence. Ned Stark did not want to be king. That was never his desire. But the North was not ready to follow a boy. Robb had spirit, but the lords needed a leader who had faced kings and lived, and so the old words were spoken again. The king in the North. This time, not Robb Stark, but Eddard Stark, first of his name. He accepted the title not for ambition, but for survival. Ravens were sent not to beg for peace, but to declare northern sovereignty. The North was no longer part of the Seven Kingdoms. It would be its own kingdom once more. But ravens can be intercepted, and in King's Landing, when the raven arrived at Cersei's hands, instead of the small councils, her fury was unmatched. "Ned Stark lives," she snarled, "and he dares to call himself king." War was inevitable. But this time, Ned would not march south. This time, the North would dig in, prepare, and hold its ground as the North declared independence. Another storm brewed far beyond the wall, at Castle Black. Jon Snow looked out at the cold horizon, unaware that his father had returned and crowned, but the dead did not care for thrones, and soon the North would face an even darker war. Yet perhaps, with Ned Stark still alive, the North had a chance, a fighting chance. But would the South allow it? Would Stannis, Baratheon, true heir, by law, accept it? Would Renly or the Lannisters tolerate the breaking of the Seven Kingdoms? Or had Ned's return just lit the first spark of a second great war? The Raven arrived at dawn. It bore no seals of loyalty, only rebellion. Cersei Lannister sat in the small council chamber with trembling hands, clutching the parchment. Eddard Stark has declared the North independent. He styles himself king. Winterfell no longer recognizes the rule of the Iron Throne. Henceforth, the North shall stand alone. The Queen Regent slammed her goblet to the floor. He dares, she hissed. He dares challenge us after I spared his daughters, Littlefinger. Ever the careful manipulator raised a brow. It seems Ned Stark is more dangerous free than dead. Varys remained silent. He already knew. In fact, he had helped Ned escape, believing a stable North could eventually bring balance. But now war was back on the board. Cersei turned to Grand Maester Pycelle. Send ravens. Every lord still loyal to the Iron Throne. Raise the banners. The North will burn for this. Cersei believed herself queen in all but name, ruling through Joffrey. But the realm was splintering faster than wildfire. In Dragonstone, Stannis Baratheon, brother of the late King Robert, received his own raven. Not from Cersei, but from a smuggler loyal to the old king. When he read the letter, Stannis' face darkened. So the wolf shows more spine than the lion. Davos Seaworth, standing nearby, said carefully, "If Ned Stark believes Joffrey is illegitimate, then perhaps I know he is illegitimate," Stannis snapped. "The throne is mine by right. But now the North breaks away like it's a merchant guild declaring bankruptcy. Then what will you do? I will take my throne, and I will drag the wolf back into the fold if I must." But he respected Stark. If Ned had lived and declared independence, it meant he believed the South was no longer worthy of loyalty. That thought stuck in Stannis' prideful heart like a blade dot in the reach. Renly Baratheon gathered allies and knights with smiles and songs. But behind the laughter, there was strategy. Eddard Stark is alive and has a crown, he told Loras Tyrell over wine. That makes him a problem, but not an enemy, not yet. Renly knew something others didn't. The realm was tired of blood. If he could unite the South peacefully, perhaps even reach out to the North, he could appear as the king of compromise. "Send word to Winterfell," he said. "A proposal, a meeting of kings. If Ned seeks peace, we'll give him the chance." But behind the letter was a subtle threat. Bend the knee, or face the storm. Back in the Westerlands, Tywin Lannister was furious. His plans had already been complicated by Robb Stark's earlier rebellion in the canon timeline. But now the father had returned, and with him the North's full might and legitimacy. Send Seer Adam Marbrand and Gregor Clegane. Tywin growled to Kevan, "We'll test their borders. If the North is a kingdom now, let's see how long it stands when its southern roads run red." Raids began. Villages along the neck were burned. Trade routes were cut off. Lannister gold funded a string of southern loyalist lords who began sending militias to harass northern caravans. The war had begun, not with banners and horns, but with fire and whispers. Meanwhile, the Riverlands found themselves trapped. House Tully had sworn allegiance to House Stark, but they had never signed up for full-blown independence. Hoster Tully, bedridden and ill, left the decision to Catelyn. "My lord father," Catelyn said softly, "if we support Ned, we risk war with every southern house. But if we don't, Seer Brynden Blackfish," Tully added, "we lose our honor, our family, and our place." In the end, the decision was made. The Riverlands would stand with the North, for better or worse, far. Across the narrow sea, in the city of Qarth, Daenerys Targaryen heard rumors of rebellion, of a king in the north, a boy king in the capital, a divided realm. Her dragons had just begun to grow, and now the throne was weakened. This was the moment she had waited for. "Let them fight," she said. "Let the lions and the wolves rip each other apart. When they are bleeding, I will return and take what is mine." Ned Stark stood atop the battlements of Winterfell, snowflakes resting on his cloak. Robb stood beside him, sword at his side. "We've had ravens, Robb," said Stannis once a parley. "Renly offers peace, Cersei offers death." Ned's eyes scanned the white horizon. "We prepare for war, but not with pride. We do not want conquest. We want freedom." "And if they force our hand?" Robb asked. "Then the North remembers," Ned said, "and the wolves will bite." The next move would not be theirs. It would come from the south, but the North was ready. Winterfell had not seen this many soldiers in decades. The courtyard rang with the clang of steel, the thump of boots, and the shouted orders of drill masters. Blacksmiths worked around the clock. The Godswood, once a place of quiet prayer, now echoed with the low murmurs of war councils. Ned Stark, now king in the north, walked among his people. His gait was slower, stifferage, and the wound he received during his escape from King's Landing had left a mark. But his eyes burned with purpose. The North had crowned him, and he would not lead them to slaughter. The first blow came from the neck. House Frey had betrayed the North, again on the orders of Cersei. Lord Walder Frey had closed the twins to northern riders. No food, no men, no movement. When Ned sent envoys, 2 were returned in pieces. The third never returned at all. Walder Frey must be dealt with, Roose Bolton said coldly in the war tent. "Cut off his head, and the twins will fall." Ned hesitated. "Not yet. We are not Lannisters. We do not murder old men from a distance." But the time for restraint was slipping. While Ned prepared the North for war, a different kind of battle began in the shadows. In the mountain clans of the North, the first men who had never bowed even to the Starks, word spread that the king in the North had returned. He had bled for the land, returned from death in the South, and raised the banner of the direwolf once more. They came down from the hills, carrying axes and oaths older than the 7. "We fought with the first Stark kings," said Con Greyblade of Clanwell. "We'll fight again." Ned didn't just have Bannerman now. He had the North entire, ancient and undivided, and in Bear Island, Lady Mage Mormont sent word. The North remembers, the Mormonts remember. The first true test came at Moat Cailin, the ancient stronghold guarding the southern pass into the North. The Lannisters had sent 3,000 men under Seer Adam Marbrand to seize it and hold the choke point. But they underestimated how the North defends its gates. Robb Stark led the vanguard, a furious, silent assault beneath a red snowstorm. The direwolf grey wind leaped through the chaos, tearing men from their horses. The northern longbows rained death, and the swamps swallowed armor whole. When the sun rose, the field was quiet. The Lannister banner had fallen. Moat Cailin stood. Robb returned to Winterfell with Lannister swords stacked in a cart and a grim look on his face. "I understand now, father," he said to Ned. "The South won't let us go. We'll have to carve our way out." But before Ned could respond, Maester Luwin entered, a scroll in his hand, sealed with black wax. "It's from Dragonstone," he said. Ned opened it. Stannis Baratheon invited him to a summit. Not in King's Landing, not in war, but in neutral ground, the Eyrie, under the protection of Lady Lysa Arryn. "He wants an alliance," Luwin said. "Or he wants to divide us and strike when we are weak," Ned muttered. Still the idea gnawed at him. If they could find peace, true peace, perhaps the North could be free without endless blood. But as always, fate had other plans. In the capital, Joffrey grew more erratic. He ordered the public execution of northern merchants. He had statues of Ned Stark torn down and replaced with lion-headed gods. He gave the mountain a free hand to raid the riverlands, not just villages, but entire towns. Even Cersei could barely control him. The realm began to fracture further. Houses formerly loyal to the crown, like House Blackwood and House Mallister, began sending envoys to Winterfell, not as enemies, but as possible allies. The North's stand was awakening old loyalties and old grudges. One night, Ned descended into the crypts of Winterfell. He stood before the statues of his ancestors, kings who had ruled before the dragons came. Kings without crowns, but not without power. "I never wanted this," he said aloud. "But if this is the price of protecting the North, then let them come." He lit a candle and left it at Lyanna's tomb, but in his heart he feared the worst, not from the South, but from within. Because if war hardened his son, if bloodshed became his legacy, would Robb Stark still be a boy when this war ended, or a wolf no man could leash? High above the Vale, in the white marble halls of the Eyrie, the winds howled like ancient spirits. The Arryn Eyrie was the only place neutral enough and secure enough to host the meeting of two kings without swords being drawn. Ned Stark rode hard from Winterfell with a small, loyal escort: Robb Stark, Lord Rickard, Karstark, and the Blackfish, Seer, Brynden Tully. They travelled through the snow-slicked Vale under Arryn protection, where even bandits dared not strike. Stannis Baratheon was already there, standing on the edge of a cliff, as if daring the mountain to take him. When the two men faced each other in the high hall, silence fell like snowfall. They were once allies, under Robert. But now, one was the rightful heir to the Iron Throne. The other was the King of the North, the first in 300 years. "Stannis," Ned said simply. "Eda." Stannis gave a curt nod. "You stole my thunder." Ned raised a brow. "I declared independence. I stole no throne. You made a crown, didn't you?" "I made a stand," Ned replied. "The 7 kingdoms are broken. The realm is rotting from the inside." Stannis' jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. As the two kings debated in the halls of the Eyrie, ravens flew in and out like whispers. One came from the Reach, Olenna Tyrell, the Queen of Thorns. It was addressed to both Ned and Stannis, and it changed everything. In the letter, Olenna confirmed what Ned had long suspected. Joffrey was not Robert's son. Not even Tommen was. All of Cersei's children were born of Jaime Lannister. Stannis already knew. But now House Tyrell knew too. "If the lions can lie," Olenna wrote, "why shouldn't the wolves and stags speak the truth together?" Stannis turned to Ned after reading it. "We have a common enemy." "We always have," Ned said. Then, for the first time in many years, they shook hands. But peace required more than handshakes. Stannis demanded recognition as the true king of Westeros, born of lawful succession. Ned refused to kneel. The North had bled too much, but they reached a compromise, a rare, hard-earned truce. Stannis would march on King's Landing to reclaim the throne from the Lannisters. The North would not interfere, but nor would they oppose him. In return, Stannis would recognize the independence of the North if he succeeded. The Riverlands under House Tully would be considered a buffer zone, loyal to neither throne until the war's end. It was the first formal division of Westeros since Aegon's conquest, and it shook the world. But good news rarely traveled alone as Ned prepared to return to Winter. A second raven arrived, not with a seal, but stained with blood. The mountain, Seer Gregor Clegane, had attacked Torrhen's Square, killing hundreds, burning grain stores, and stringing up Stark banners for sport. He had orders from Cersei to make the North bleed. When Ned returned, the North erupted in rage. Even House Bolton, cold and calculating, demanded retribution. "There can be no peace," Roose Bolton said. "We must crush them." But Ned had another plan at Ned's command. Robb Stark was given full command of the northern host. "You ride for the neck," Ned said. "Cut off the Lannister supply lines. Take back the twins." Robb didn't flinch. His voice was steady. "And if Walder Frey resists, then let the gods judge him," Ned said grimly. But the North cannot afford another traitor. With Grey Wind at his side, Robb rode south with 20,000 men. The banners of the direwolf filled the winter sky, and for the first time in generations, the south trembled far to the east on Dragonstone. Melisandre watched the flames dance. She turned to Stannis as he readied his ships. "There is power in the North," she whispered. "Blood in the snow. The Lord of Light sees the storm coming." "And what of the wolves?" Stannis asked. "They remember," she said with a sly smile. "And they bite." Ned stood on the battlements once more, watching the stars. Beside him, Catelyn held his arm. "You trust Stannis?" she asked. "No," Ned admitted, "but I trust his hatred for the Lannisters more than his hunger for power." He turned to her. "If he takes the throne, he'll let us go. If not, then we fight." They both knew peace was temporary. The storm was still building. The fleets of Stannis Baratheon cut through the waves like blades, black sails snapping in the wind. Dozens of warships sailed toward the mouth of the Blackwater Bay, their hulls packed with soldiers, siege towers, and barrels of fire. This was not the botched assault of cannon. This time, Stannis had northern gold, Vale grain, and Tyrell whispers softening his path. He had support, and most importantly, he had time. Time to prepare, time to learn, and this time there would be no wildfire trap. King's Landing braced for war inside the Red Keep. Cersei Lannister clutched her son's crown like a drowning woman grips driftwood. Joffrey had grown even more unhinged. He executed maids for disloyal glances and forced knights to duel for amusement. The court whispered of madness, whispers that echoed too closely with the name heiress. Cersei summoned Tyrion, desperate. "We need allies," she said. "Where are the Lannister armies?" "Scattered," Tyrion answered grimly. "Your father marches west to fight the Riverlords. The Reach is silent. The North has shut its gates, and Stannis is coming." "Then find the wildfire," she hissed. Eyes darkened. "We used it all last time. then make more. But alchemists can't conjure what doesn't exist. The city was out of tricks, and out of time. Stannis' forces surrounded King's Landing by land and sea. Siege towers lined the banks. Catapults launched stones day and night. His soldiers didn't chant or boast. They simply advanced, disciplined and cold, and behind it all, Melisandre's red flame flickered from the hills, promising divine vengeance. Inside the city, fear turned to desperation. Bread riots erupted. Gold cloaks deserted. Even the nobles began whispering of surrender. Then, on the fourth day, the gates of the city trembled. The walls were cracking. And just as Stannis ordered the final assault, a white raven arrived at Winterfell. Its words were few, but their weight was enormous. Stannis betrayed us. He named himself king of all Westeros, including the north. He will not honor the pact. The message had come from Lady Lysa Arryn, who had overheard his new declaration in the Eyrie. With King's Landing at his mercy, Stannis had cast aside his promises and demanded total submission. Ned Stark read the message twice, then closed his eyes. I knew he could not help himself. Catelyn clenched her fists. What now? We stand alone, Ned said, as we always have. The news of Stannis' betrayal tore through the north like wildfire. House Karstark demanded vengeance. The Boltons urged a preemptive strike, and House Mormont sent a short but firm reply. The wolf does not bow to the stag. But the most surprising reaction came from the Riverlands. Edmure Tully, with the Blackfish at his side, sent riders across the Trident, calling for arms not in the name of the crown, but in defense of the North's sovereignty. It was no longer just about independence. It was about honor betrayed, as Robb Stark's army moved south to secure the bottleneck at Moat Cailin. They encountered an unexpected ambush, not from Lannisters, but Stannis loyalists, seeking to hold the neck for their new king. Robb did not hesitate. Grey Wind charged first, and the northern cavalry followed. The battle was fierce, fought in the rain and swamp. Arrows turned the air black. Men drowned in the marsh dot. But by dawn, the stag banners lay trampled. The neck remained northern dot. Robb had tasted betrayal for the first time, and it hardened. Him we trust no kings, he told his men. Only blood. Back at the siege, Stannis finally breached King's Landing. The gates splintered. His soldiers poured into the city. Cersei and Joffrey retreated to the Red Keep, guarded by the remnants of the Kingsguard. But there would be no last stand as the city burned. Tyrion Lannister opened a secret passage beneath the castle and fled, taking Tommen and Myrcella with him. Cersei refused to leave. When Stannis' men reached the throne room, they found the Iron Throne empty, and the Queen Regent seated on it, wine in hand, her lips purple with poison. Joffrey's body lay beside her. The Baratheon banners flew over the Red Keep once again, but victory was hollow in the throne room. Stannis Baratheon sat upon the Iron Throne, but instead of cheers, there was silence. The people hated him. The court feared him. The North defied him. And far in the shadows, Melisandre's red eyes glowed. "You are king," she said softly, "but not of peace." He clenched the arms of the throne. "The North will kneel," he growled. "They won't," she whispered. "Not while the wolf still stands." Snow blanketed Winterfell, softening the harsh stone walls, muffling the sound of war preparations. But inside the castle there was no warmth, only tension. Ned Stark stood before the ancient heart tree, eyes closed, lips silent. He had led his people through fire, betrayal, and false kings. He had stood against the Lannisters, against Frey treachery, and even against the ambitions of Stannis Baratheon. And yet the storm was not over. Now 3 wars loomed over the north. One with Stannis, who sat on the Iron Throne but broke his word. One with the dead, whose whispers were growing beyond the wall. And one with the dragons, which had just crossed the narrow sea. The north stood tall. But it stood alone in the skies over Dragonstone. Fire danced again. Daenerys Targaryen, her dragons, now massive and terrifying, had taken the ancestral home of her house. With her came unsullied legions, Dothraki screamers, and fire-breathing vengeance. Unlike Stannis, she came not with law, but with myth, and unlike Robert or Renly, she knew how to win hearts. Daenerys learned quickly of Ned Stark, the honorable wolf, the man who defied the South and survived. She respected that. He may be the only man worth speaking to, she said. And so she sent an envoy to Winterfell, a peace offer, but peace came with fire beneath it. As the Stark household debated Daenerys' approach, a raven arrived from Castle Black. Jon Snow had sent a single sentence: "They are coming. White Walkers, the ancient threat, the long night." They weren't legend anymore, they were marching. Ned's heart sank. His bastard son, lost to the cold and duty, now cried out for help. "We can't fight the South and the dead," Robb said. "We have to choose." But Ned's voice was iron. "No, we fight for the living, all of them, for the first time." In memory, Winterfell summoned the wildlings. Tormund Jonspane arrived with his best fighters, saying, "Jon Snow vouches for you. That's enough for me." They were crude, fierce, distrustful, but they hated the dead, and so they were. Allies. Then came the Vale, with Sansa Stark at its heart. Lysa Arryn had been overthrown by her own bannermen for madness and cowardice. Sansa, once a political pawn, now rode with Lord Royce and 3,000 knights. Under a new banner, the Moon and the Wolf, Winterfell roared with renewed strength. But the Iron Throne would not be mocked. Stannis Baratheon broke the pact and sent 10,000 troops toward the Neck. They torched outposts, seized towns, and declared northern rebellion over. But they didn't reach Winterfell. They were met by Robb Stark, leading a united host of Northerners, Riverlanders, Wildlings, and Vale Riders. The Battle of the Weeping Marshes was brutal. Spears clashed in Need Borta. War cries echoed over the bogs. In the end, Robb Stark stood victorious, wounded, but unbroken, and Stannis' men were forced to retreat. Soon after, Daenerys herself arrived at Winterfell, not as conqueror, but as queen, seeking unity. She met Ned Stark face to face. "I do not want your crown," she said, "but I want your help to destroy the dead. And after that, perhaps we can speak of peace." Ned studied her, fire in her eyes, steel in her spine. She reminded him of Lyanna, fierce, proud, tragic, and he nodded. "You'll have it." In the frozen fields beyond the wall, the living stood together, Northerners with direwolves on their banners, Dothraki with curved blades, unsullied in silent formation, dragons roaring through the sky, and at the front, Jon Snow reunited, with his father not by blood, but by bond. The war for the Dawn lasted 7 days. The dead were relentless, giants of ice, wolves turned to whites, whole battalions lost in a single night, but with dragonfire, dragonglass, and sacrifice, the Night King fell, pierced not by a blade, but by the fire of a queen and the trust of a wolf. Winter was ended. After the war, the world changed. Stannis had fallen in a second rebellion, betrayed by his own men after losing the North's support. The Iron Throne crumbled in a fire set by Daenerys, not to rule it, but to destroy it. And then she left Westeros, crossing the sea once more, her dragons soaring behind. Ned Stark, tired, grey, and quiet, returned to Winterfell. He declined any southern throne. He named Robb Stark as his heir. He watched Jon ride beyond the wall once more, a protector, a bridge between two worlds. And he walked the godswood alone, whispering his final prayers beneath the weirwood. Years passed, and the North became a true kingdom once more, not through conquest, but by endurance. The wolf had not knelt, the wolf had not roared, the wolf had endured. And when Ned Stark finally died, peacefully, surrounded by kin, they carved into his tomb the words he had lived by. There must always be a Stark in Winterfell.